All right, welcome everyone to the first episode for the 22-23 basketball season of the And One podcast. You can't have the one without the and. So today we got a really good guest with us. Jeff Cross is coming to our show from Illinois, and we're going to be talking about how to proactively navigate that coach partner and player interaction. That's the most complicated thing besides calling fouls and not calling fouls that we have to do as officials, is manage coaches, manage players, and that's a complicated recipe. So I've known Jeff for a long time. He's a great official, great communicator, and just a great person. Always has really good things to say when it comes to officiating. So we're super excited to have Jeff with us. He's going to talk about some strategies and techniques to engage coaches and try to eliminate that bias and have a positive growth mindset so that we can get this game done, do our job, and the players have the best outcome. I mean, really, that's what this is all about. So we're going to stress some things that just give you some tools that allow you to make coaches connections with coaches and players, and then have a functional game with your partners. So welcome, Jeff.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. I'm super excited to be part of it.
Yeah, and Kent.
The And One podcast. The And One. I got it.
The And One. You can't have the one without the and.
I like it.
Yeah, Jeff, we got Kent Meehe's with me tonight too. Kent just got off the cross country season. Kent's a teacher in Darlington and coaches cross country, and he also officiates high school basketball. So welcome back to another year, Kent.
Yeah, thanks for having me back on again, ready to get going. And one thing I'll say before we start tonight's episode, Brian hosts a really good reffing camp up in Marshfield, and I've gone the past 2 years. And every year people fill out a form talking about things that they want to learn from camp. And the last 2 years, the number one thing that people put down was communication with coaches. So I think this is a really appropriate topic to talk about for our first episode, as people such as myself are just getting underway with our basketball season. So Jeff, I'm going to throw out our first question for you here. Can you talk about some of your go-tos when you're communicating with coaches? Either people say have some back pocket responses to have right away. So maybe talk about some of your favorite go-tos when you're talking with coaches, and maybe just some philosophies when you're trying to have positive communication during the game.
Sure. Yeah, that's everyone wants to have that toolbox full of tools. And the first thing I want to really make mention of is, just because you have a toolbox in your tool doesn't mean you know how to operate the tool. So a tool that I use, that Brian may not be able to use because he hasn't experimented with using that tool yet. He could try it. He may have to use his right hand instead of his left hand for the wrench, those kind of things. So you gotta, just because it's a tool, and you saw Jeff Cross using it in his toolbox, doesn't mean you could just take that tool and put it in your toolbox and expect it to work the same way it worked for Jeff Cross, because it still needs to fit your hand. You still need to understand that I got a lefty, loosey, righty, tighty. All those things still need to apply. You can't just put it in there and expect it to work. So I want to say that first. And second is, you talked about communication was the number one requirement, or said that for Brian's camp, they want to hear more about communication. In our podcast, the Uncommon Drive podcast, I mean, every week we get constant emails that they just want to hear more about communication. And they're, if every time we put a podcast up that is entailed for communication, that's titled communication, that gets the most listens. Everyone wants to know more about it. So, to your question though, I think the biggest thing, we all have little responses, and I can give you all the little responses I give to certain situations. The one I like to use a lot is when we hear officials talk about admitting that they're wrong. right? We admit that we're wrong. Yep, I missed that play. And I hear officials talk about they admit they missed it, and they'll say something along the lines, it won't happen again. Well, those are two things that we hope are true, right? Yep, I admit I missed it, and then when I say I won't happen again, I think you're painting yourself into a corner. I would love to say that I would never miss to play again, but I'm, I have a heartbeat, I have blood pumping through me, and I could be unfocused for a minute, and it could happen again, even though I just told someone that it will never happen again. So I guess I want to start off with saying I never. I'm going to be very cautious when I say that word. I very rarely say that will never happen again. I will do my best for that not to happen again, but I very rarely say the phrase that will never happen again. When we talk about, I missed that play. Yep, I missed that play. And I hear officials. I go to meetings all the time, and I go to training sessions, and I hear lead clinicians saying, just, sometimes all you can do is admit that you missed a play. I believe we need to find ways to say those same things in different phrases. They mean the same thing, but because when we say, yep, I missed it, that gets very old. You could see a coach 3, 4, sometimes, maybe 5 or 6 times if you get into the postseason, and they hear you every game go, I missed it. Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah. Plus, a coach probably doesn't want to hear that. Say like, oh, yep, my bad. Mm-hmm. They want to know why. They want to know why. Like, hey, why did you miss that? And then that gets into another line of communication that we got to be ready for.
Right. They definitely don't want to hear it when they see you every other week. You know what I mean? Week 1, week 3, week 6. And here, he or she keeps saying it again. So I like to use phrases like, if I miss a play and I've still made the decision, whether it be wrong or right, in the moment the coach believes I'm wrong, I say phrases like, I wish they all could be great calls. Instead of saying I missed it, I wish they all could be great calls, because it's still a call that I had to make, and it may not be my best call, but it's still the decision's been made, and I can't do anything different about that. So I'm still admitting that I'm wrong. So now I have room for, in 2 weeks, yeah, you might be right. I might have missed that. So then now I have 2 phrases. Now week 6 comes along. Maybe I pull out. Yeah, that was a tough play. I wish I would have had a better look at that play. All those mean the same thing, but I'm saying them differently. So a coach isn't like, every time I see this guy or gal, they say the same thing. Yeah, I missed it. Yeah, I missed it. Where we can say the same thing, but differently. So they're receiving it differently. So they don't just get, mumbled over with, oh, here we go again. Same response. He missed it.
And that's probably a good way to practice some of those too, Jeff. Like, hey, let me try this tonight. Maybe have another response another week. And you find that a coach responds really well to that. Right. And then like you said, it's like, okay, now I know how to use this tool, like you referred to earlier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's, I do a lot of things, I call it preparation. I want to practice what I'm going to say. So there's many times in games where a coach doesn't ask me a single question the whole game. The whole 40 minutes, there's not a single question. But there's multiple questions coming out from coaches, but I'm not part of those questions. So I really pay attention to what would I say to the coach if the coach was to ask me about that play. So I'm prepared for that. I don't necessarily have to answer it, but I'm already putting these phrases into my head. I would say, yeah, I need to get a better angle. Yeah, I clearly saw a hit on the elbow. Whatever it is, so I'm prepared for those things, so I'm practicing these phrases, these one-liners, or whatever you want to call those. I'm practicing those even when I'm not getting asked questions. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes, Jeff, there's this this mindset that we work for coaches, and we really don't work for coaches. We communicate with coaches, and we manage the things that coaches do, but we work for the game. So how do we still have mutual respect, but also not feel like we're a bartender or a waiter or a waitress or a host where, let me get you another cherry for your old fashioned, coach. Let me get you that extra olive for your dry martini. What's the best way for us to not cross that line? Because as well as I do, Jeff, that if I went into a coach's huddle and started to, say, hey, number 24, you go check in. We're not playing a 1-3-1 anymore. We're going to switch to a 2-1-2, and then we're going to go man after the next possession. We'd be, up the flagpole. So how do we do that?
Well, I think this is a great point. And we spend a lot of time, as you say, being, trying to be the bartender or not being the bartender, not feeling like the bartender. But we need to get coaches to understand quickly and as soon as possible that we work for the league, not for the coach. When a commissioner or an assigner or whoever gives you your games, gives you the games via the league. So if I work in the Horizon League, I work for the league. I may only work for 6 out of the 10 schools, but I still work for the league. So listen, even though I'm in front of you tonight, I'm calling fouls and violations for the benefit of the league, not just for this game tonight. And if anytime I get approached by a coach about, hey, you need to give us that call, you need to do those things, I quickly try to get them to understand that, listen, I work for the league and not just you tonight. I want you to understand that I'm trying to do that more than, because I may be at Green Bay one night and Youngstown State the next weekend. Even though those coaches think I'm working for them, I'm not. The reason I called a foul here tonight is so when Green Bay is in Milwaukee, those same league officials are going to call that type of foul. So we're working for the league, not necessarily for so that, your analogy of I want another cherry for my old fashioned. Well, unfortunately, the company in general only requires one cherry. They don't do 2. If you're going to get a second cherry, that's going to cost you more money. These are the outlines or the restrictions I've been given via the league and via the NCAA, and that is to call that a violation, call that a two hands on, whether you're unhappy with it or not. I don't know if I'm being clear on that.
No, you are, and we have to have some boundaries with regards to certain things that go beyond the normal kind of communication where, body language. If I let a coach have bad body language and let a coach yell across the court, then if I don't respond with accountability, hey, coach, please, if you have a question, I will answer your question. I believe I have answered your question. Can we move on now? Anything beyond that is kind of what I was referring to as now I'm starting to bartend.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when that second cherry comes
sure.
up.
Here's a question I have for you, Brian. So when we have a situation like that and the coach is yelling at you, maybe across the floor, or maybe even you might be right next to each other, and what's your response there?
When a coach is doing that to me?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
A lot of times I'll say, Coach, do you have a question about that play? I'm glad to answer questions.
Mm-hmm.
And
so
that's usually my favorite go-to.
Yeah, for me, I think that's a very standard answer. How can I answer your question, right? For me, I believe I have better response and better understanding from a coach when I see a coach who's elevated, yelling across the floor or maybe right next to me. My question is, what did I miss? Because now,
good one too, yeah.
right? Because now they're going, oh, he just admitted that he missed something. Now he wants my opinion on this play. And he can, okay, so now he can feed into me what his concern is, right? And what I miss. Oh man, and they clearly took 2 steps, traveled, whatever the scenario is. And then my second step to that is, and then I use this all the time. Even in my 30 years of marriage, I use it all the time. I try to find a time and a way to agree with them. If I have a coach who tells me she clearly traveled, and I would say, I agree, she did travel after she got bumped by the defender. I'm agreeing with the coach, still sticking with the foul that I called, and everyone understands, yep, I agree. Oh, they agree with me. They're caught off guard, they're on their heels a little bit, and plus I still get the final say on calling a shooting foul for whatever the scenario might be, right? Oh, that's she ran her over. Yep, she did. I agree, she did run her over, but unfortunately she went into her first, then she ran her over.
Jeff, this kind of makes me think that this whole business of communicating is like plumbing. In the old days they had galvanized metal, and then they came out with copper, and now they have the flexible PEX where you don't even have to really light a torch anymore. So there's all these different ways to plumb, and there's all these different ways to network and communicate with coaches. I really like some of those different strategies, because it's all about mindset, right? Like, if I can get the coach to believe that I'm listening empathetically and I'm putting myself in his or her shoes, then that's really that's a win-win, right? That's a Stephen Covey win-win. That's what we always want, is that paradigm of the win-win. So here's a little Kenny Rogers for you, Jeff, the gambler.
Sure.
The saying in Kenny Rogers, the Gambler song is, you got to know when to hold them, know when to fold them, know when to walk away, and know when to run.
When to run.
Right. So how can you relate that back to our job? Officially, no matter what level. I mean, I did 6 games today with my 13-year-old, and we had some really good conversations about how he can better explain himself to coaches, because he made good calls and the coaches would ask him questions, but he doesn't know how to respond, right? He can respond to me with what he called, but that's a little bit different. So his understanding of communication is coming from the lens of a 13-year-old, but we're in an adult business when we're doing high school athletics and college, athletics. So how can we take that phrase and kind of break that down to what we have to do every time we officiate basketball?
I'm gonna go backwards, I think. So know when to run. To me, that's never run, unless of course you are just in some sort of life-threatening situation. But I feel like the running from the communication, from the response, from the opportunity to communicate with the coach, whatever that is I'm probably going to offend some people, but I think it's very cowardly. I think you got to, to do our job, just to put on our shirt, it takes extreme courage. And you have courage as soon as you put on this shirt. But if you run from a chance to communicate because you don't know the answer or whatever it is, that's a cowardly move. And coaches can sense that. They know when they're just being avoided.
Blood in the water, right?
Right. Yep. They know you're just trying to avoid me. because you don't know the answer. So they see you as cowardly. So I would say never run. So let's go. So we got know when to hold them, know when to fold them, know when to walk away, and know when to run, right? Walk away. As soon as I would walk away, as soon as I know my point has been made or their point has been made. Now, I don't always have to make my point, but there's many, many times the coaches tell me whatever the scenario is about, 3 seconds in the lane, they've been in the lane all night, la, 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 and they go on for whatever. And they stop and take a breath and they look at me. I don't have anything to respond except for, you've made your point, coach. Thank you. That's when I walk away. So as soon as I can either make my point or accept the fact the coach has made their point, acknowledge that, that's when I can walk away. You've made your point, coach. And then I would walk away. Hold them, fold them, right? I don't know when I would ever fold them, dude. That's tough.
I'm making Jeff Cross think now. That's
right. If I was to ever fold them, I think to me, folding would mean, to me, what I'm hearing is, if I was to fold, I'm saying, coach, you won, I've lost. You've won, you've lost. Your point, as you've made about the 3 seconds, is very valid, and we need to get in better position to see the 3-second call. This 3 seconds in a lane. So I fold, you win. You win this one. I think those are times when we can do that. I'm not a big poker player, but I think it's pretty tough to win a lot of money if you're folding all the time. So I'm going to say this, it's going to be pretty tough to be a successful official in any sport if you're always folding.
I think that's a really good point, Jeff. And I also think, like, sometimes there's a time where we have to move on from the position that maybe the coach just, we're at a stalemate, right? Sometimes I think folding could be, I want to move on now, because as well as I do that as soon as the ball is live and the clock's running again, or we put the ball in bounce and the kids are playing, then we move on, right? And I think sometimes maybe that's comparable to folding.
Yeah, and see, I was going to say that point for holding, right? I got to know when to hold them. I've made my decision. I feel confident my decision is within the rules. I'm going to hold them. Here we go. Ball's back into play. I'm holding them on that play. These are the cards I have. I've laid out my cards. I'm holding on these cards. Ball's back in play. Let's roll. So I think that's a very good question. It'd be interesting to hear. Yeah, well, because it's multiple layers, right? Interesting to see how act to that questions. Really 4 questions in one. That's really cheating.
Jeff, I can't make this easy.
Yeah, I know. Thanks for that. I appreciate it.
You can't do that, right? You got to put you on the spot.
Yeah.
You can't just give half of the lyrics. We had to go, to the whole stanza.
Yeah, right. Yeah. That's right. Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah. Yeah, that's good stuff. That's how I think of those. And I think that could be a chapter of a book. When to hold them, when to fold them, when to walk away, and when to run.
Going back to like my 13-year-old.
So yeah, I want to talk about that too. So go ahead.
By no means do. And here's the funny thing too, Jeff. Like we're having conversations about what age group should we be recruiting. And it's very interesting because you would think that you would want to go after high school kids to teach them how to officiate, which we should. But the age group of kids where we can get them really excited and really get them to listen and want to be mentored is 11, 12, 13, 14-year-olds. Like I look at my son's growth as an official, and every time he officiates, he gets a little better, but he just doesn't have that ability to go stand in front of an adult and explain the principle of verticality.
Sure.
and talk about like legal guarding position. But he made two really tough block calls today where the defender wasn't legal. And he called a blocking foul, and he was right on both. And of course, I made him go to the table to report, and he didn't want to. He wanted to call the foul and stay on the end line. I was like, nope, you're going table side. You're going to go over there. And I was listening to him, and it was very interesting to see like how he was trying to search for the right information to give, because we're information givers, right? We give information about fouls or why we didn't call a foul. And he was struggling to find that information. So, he was in essence folding, but I think it was more, he was folding because he didn't have that confidence, because he's 13.
Right. Well, what we do as humans, right? Just as humans in general, we observe and report. That's what we do. So whether it's within ourselves and in your son's case, he observed a foul. Okay. He called the foul. Now he's going to report the foul. Now someone's asking him about this, and he's going to observe what he saw, and he's going to give a report to the coach of what he saw. And to go back to when you talked about it earlier, where you said your son feels very comfortable talking to you about it, but not to a coach. Well, that's because your son talks to you all the time at dinner, lunch, breakfast, weekends, fishing, whatever that is. Your son doesn't talk to this stranger on a Saturday afternoon or a Sunday afternoon, but once a week, maybe once every 3 weeks. So the more your son talks to a stranger and he observes and he gives us a report, the more comfortable he or she will be within that situation. So that way it becomes a little bit more easy. And I've said this for years. Why are we have people that struggle to communicate with coaches? Well, the number one reason is because they don't. Why do we have people that struggle to communicate with their supervisors? Well, the number one reason is because they don't. You have no problem communicating with your supervisor, no matter what the scenario is, whether it's an officiating or in your 9-to-5 job in the office space. If you communicate with your supervisor daily and often, you become very comfortable with that. And when you become very comfortable with that, and then they have that difficult situation, it's a lot easier to do because you become comfortable with that. So that's what your son is going through right now, that growth spurt of being able, he can observe and report to himself. He's still struggling to observe and report to people he doesn't know yet.
Yeah, let's go back to, communicating when we're fishing. So there is only communicating when we're fishing, when we're not catching fish. When there's fish being caught, there's no communicating. Just so we can be on the same page about that one. When there's fish being caught, there's nobody's talking.
I would disagree. There is communicating. It's just not with our lips.
That's right.
We're communicating with reeling it in.
Hey, get the net.
Oh, I got a big one. Yeah, I got a big one. Ooh, there must be a school over here, right? All this stuff, right? So you're still communicating. You're not necessarily saying, hey, you need to use a minnow. We need to be at 4 feet instead of 8 feet, all these things, but you're still communicating. And your son is doing that too. When he blows the whistle and calls a block, he's communicating, even though he's not talking to you at the time.
Hey, pick that anchor up, would you?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I've lost many of anchors trying to fish with my younger kids. So.
And Jeff, when all of that is going on, how important is it for us to be keeping our cool while trying to communicate with coaches? Because if the coach has a question and we're reporting what we see to them, that's pretty easy to be cordial and to hear each other out and then to move on. When a coach's temper starts to get up, some of us may find ourselves rise in our own temperature and have our own tempers get up and kind of lose our train of thought or get into a shouting match back and forth, which obviously isn't productive at all. So do you have any, I don't know, things that you think of when a coach is getting out of hand, or do you just kind of go back to your philosophies that you just explained?
Yeah, well, I have a little idiosyncrasy that I do when I'm refereeing. If things get really, really just like the house is on fire kind of thing, I carry my wedding ring in my left front pocket and I just circle it with my index finger. And basically, I'm just kind of, for lack of better terms, trying to center myself and going, okay, no matter what happens here tonight, I'm going to get in the car. I'm going to call my wife and she's going to say she loves me. Though that's going to happen after 30 years of marriage. She may say, what the heck happened at the game? All these things. But I know no matter what happens in the game, I am going to go home to someone who has loved me for over 30 years. So that is very reassuring to me. But I will say, in order to be great, you have to be able to function and you have to be able to you have to be able to operate during chaos. If you can't function and operate during chaos, there is no chance of you being great. And I don't even say, I have a couple levels. I have good, I have great, I have excellence, then I have genius. I want to operate at a genius level as much as possible. And if I can't do that during chaos, I'm just going to be average, no matter how I look at it, no matter how good I think I'm going to be or how good I think I was that night. If I can't function and operate while chaos is happening, I'm not going to be any good. Brett Favre, I know you guys are big, Wisconsin people. So Brett Favre has become a great quarterback because why? He's able to function during chaos. When we got two defensive lines, people coming at him, the nose tackles coming at him, and they're blitzing from the safeties, and he's able to function and throw a 10-yard pass. He's able to do that during chaos, and we need to be able to do that as officials. When chaos does happen, and we could still function just as if everything was under control, then we're gonna be going towards a genius level.
And I think that's super important and ties back into, like you said, when coaches are talking to other people, you're going through that in your head. It's like, okay, I would respond this way or I'd respond that way. And yeah, just when that happens, just being able to step up into the plate and say, all right, here we go. I know what to do. I've been preparing for this. And yeah, just being ready for the moment and being able to handle it in the best way.
And I've said this for years. In order for us to communicate the best, how do people become very good communicators on the floor? And they do that via being very good at the rules. I can explain the rules of verticality, legal defense, 3 seconds, all that stuff, if I'm very versed in the rules. If I'm so at the rules, it's pretty difficult for me to communicate effectively to anyone on why it is or is not 3 seconds. You're on mute, Kent.
Oh, sorry about that.
Right.
No, those are all great points, Jeff, and hopefully things that you've shared tonight, we can all take something and, like you said, practice it throughout the season and hopefully get our seasons off to a really good start. So to close us out, Jeff, you've given us some really, really good advice that we can take with us in our future games. What kind of a legacy do you want to leave in your officiating? And I know you said you do your own podcast. What do you want to, I guess, be remembered for? Or when officials talk about, yeah, I learned this from Jeff, or man, this Jeff Cross, like what do you want people to remember about what you've done for the game?
Yeah, this is a great question. I think everyone should be very, very very pressured to know that every decision they make throughout life is going to affect their legacy. And for me, I want my legacy to be, no matter what the situation, no matter what phone call time you call Jeff, or you text Jeff, or you email Jeff, whatever that is, any conversation you had with Jeff, or any kind of experience you've had with Jeff, I want people to understand that he showed love. He showed love even in times when, I had to be on maybe a missed call from one of my partners that put us into a situation that we couldn't rectify. And I had to be on the phone for 2 hours with my coordinator. And I called my partner back who made this call, who put us in the situation. I still showed them love. So I think it's very important that we show others love, and we need to be compassionate, and we need to have composure like no one else all the time, not just when it's easy. And if people could, if I die tomorrow and they're at my funeral, I want people to say those 3 words: he loved, he was compassionate, and he was always composed.
Those are great legacy marks for sure, Jeff. And I've known you a pretty long time, and I see all 3 of those leaching out of you. So thanks so much for the great podcast, and that'll wrap up the first episode of the And One podcast. And remember, you can't have the one without the and.
Well, that's right. I love it.
Have a great night, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.